Support for this episode comes from the Zellico School of Jewish Nonprofit Management. Are you a Jewish professional ready to lead with purpose and shape the future of Jewish life? At the Zellico School of Jewish Nonprofit Management, also known as Z School, we offer a Master of Science in Organizational Leadership and Innovation. It's a 14-month accelerated graduate degree designed for working professionals. You stay in your job while you earn your degree, thanks to a mostly virtual format, combined with in-person leadership conferences that deepen learning and strengthen your cohort and professional network. You'll gain practical skills in nonprofit strategy, fundraising, leadership, and creative problem solving, grounded in applied Jewish wisdom. And you'll join a global network of changemakers transforming organizations, communities, and careers. Learn more and apply today at zschool.huc.edu.
This is Judaism Unbound, episode 521, Jewish Conversion, Immigration, and Nativism. Welcome back, everyone. I'm Dan Liebenson.
And I'm Lex Rofberg.
And today is one of those episodes where we're celebrating the milestone that we're about to reach of 10 years of Judaism Unbound, and we're inviting back some of our earliest and most impactful guests to kind of check in with them on how their thinking has evolved since we first encountered them in the early days of the podcast. Our guest today, Juan Mejia, has actually been back a few times since he originally joined us back in episode 57. He joined us for a video conversation just a few days into the COVID-19 shutdown in 2020, and he also was our guest for episode 387. And he's one of the major voices in our book, Judaism Unbound, Bound. Just as we started our second year back in 2017, our conversation with Juan Mejia pushed us to zoom out and ask even bigger questions than we'd been asking. Not only about what Judaism is for, but also about who Judaism is for. Juan Mejia asked us and our listeners to think beyond those who are already Jewish, to think globally, beyond just the United States, and also to really internalize the ways in which the internet had already changed what it means to be Jewish, and to imagine what Judaism would or could become if we took all these questions really seriously. We're still asking those questions, and so is he. So we're so excited to dive in and build on these threads. But before we do, Lex, can you share this week's Judaism Unbouncements?
I absolutely can. First off, we've got a big one. Judaism Inbound is back. Our Intro to Judaism course that we offer online is back once more. It will be beginning in just a few weeks, and you can sign up by heading to judaismunbound.com/classes. Financial aid is available, and when you go there, you'll find some other courses as well. We will highlight those in future weeks, but for this week, we're highlighting Judaism Inbound, which is a chance for you if you're looking to convert to Judaism, if you're looking for an Intro to Judaism course for any other reason, you can take this. So head to judaismunbound.com/classes. Tell your friends about it who might be interested. We would love for this to spread far and wide. A few hundred people have taken this course. You can be the next one. Just head to judaismunbound.com/classes. Second unbouncement, we're really loving what's happening in our Discord server. Discord.judaismunbound.com is where you can join our place to interact with other Judaism Unbounders from all around the world. There's incredible conversations happening there on a daily basis now. A few hundred people have joined, and we hope that you will hop in as well. You can talk about what's going on in Jewish life today. You can learn about Jewish history from different really, really smart people there. You can share photos of your pets. You can do whatever is calling to you through a Judaism Unbound lens. So many things happening. Discord.judaismunbound.com. Dan, I'll pass it back to you.
Thanks, Lex. Now here's a bit more background about our guest today, Juan Mejia. For longtime listeners, Juan Mejia needs no introduction, but as a reminder, and for newer listeners, here's an intro anyway. Juan Mejia was born in Bogota, Colombia, to a Catholic family. And after discovering the Jewish roots of his family and the beauty of Judaism, he formally converted to Judaism and ultimately studied for and received ordination as a rabbi by the conservative movement's Jewish Theological Seminary. He became a rabbi in 2009 and, residing in Oklahoma City, has for many years been creating free, web-based, accessible Jewish content in Spanish. And he also reaches out to individuals and communities interested in living a Jewish life, often facilitating their conversion to Judaism. His free translated and transliterated prayer books, Kol Tuv Sfarad, a Sephardi prayer book, and Minchat Raphael, an Ashkenazi prayer book, are used in scores of synagogues and smaller communities all around the world. His YouTube channel, at Torah Para Todos, reaches over 18,000 people across the Spanish-speaking world. Juan Mejia, welcome back to Judaism Unbound. It's so great to have you with us again.
Such an honor to be back.
So we're here in this 10th year of Judaism Unbound, and we've wanted to have, as we've talked about, we've wanted to have a few of our earliest guests on that made these huge impressions on us when we started the podcast. And in a lot of ways, the podcast is the legacy of those early guests as much as it is ours. So your episode is one that we always talk about. Lex and I always talk about when people ask us what we really learned on the podcast that changed our thinking. And I wanted to go back to those early days of 2017 and ask you, as you think about who you were in 2017 and how you were thinking in 2017 and what you've been doing since then, but also how your thinking has changed or not changed since then, and whether it's changed or not changed, what are the dominant ideas that are driving you these days?
According to the Talmud, one of the most dangerous exercises is to prophesy good things. When you prophesy bad things, it's easy, but when you prophesy a good thing, those things better come to fruition. And back in 2017, I was extremely optimistic about the power of public access of Torah. When I started my own journey to Judaism, the only place you could get Judaism in Colombia and Latin America was books, but then the internet really changed everything. We have Safaria, we have pretty much the internet translating itself. So even if resources were not available in Spanish or Portuguese, internet is really just creating that knowledge and liberating it. And then when we spoke again 2 or 3 years later, I was extremely optimistic about the power of community. That was the thing in 2017 that I was struggling. What are these people on the periphery that are getting all this Torah, they're getting all this Jewish learning? What are they missing? They're missing access to community. And the pandemic really opened our institutions globally. Synagogues broadcasting from New York, but they're getting watched all over the world. Synagogues that are broadcasting out of Argentina, but they're reaching the entire continent. I thought that those were the two components that you would need for this global Jewish renaissance, but then October 7th happened. And that has really created a setback in our ability, I think, to open the Jewish community up to the stranger, up to new possibilities. Not so much in the United States, but in Israel, in Europe, in Latin America, there is a new series of barriers and new arguments against why we should welcome those from the outside. So I'm not willing to give up on the good prophecy, but it was not going to be as easy as I thought it was going to be.
And that's because people are suspicious that those people might have ill intentions or other reasons?
Interestingly, I think the arguments I've heard really parallel the immigration debate we are having here in the United States. You have the argument, well, they're infiltrators. We don't know who these people are coming. We can't open our communities after October 7th. We really need to be wary of people who want to get to know us to hurt us. That is a common argument. Then there's the more common Malthusian argument, like we don't have enough resources, couched in language, well, we can't digest this amount of people. If we open the gates to conversion in a more liberal way, in a more understanding way, then there'll be more of them than of us. And it's still the disconnect that converts are not fully Jews, or that Judaism is something that you cannot learn. You have to have some level of genetics or trauma in order to fully grasp it, and you just can't diligently learn it like any other topic in the world. Also, touching on the current debate that we're having in this country, this has raised issues of affordability. Even communities that are pretty open and that don't have any ideological objections to receiving large amounts of converts are facing the issue that there is a ceiling. There is it costs money to be a Jew. Is it really worth it converting people who are not going to be able to afford synagogue dues, or who are going to be able to afford Jewish education for their children, who are not going to be able to buy kosher food, to buy a mezuzah. All of these things have become so expensive in our communities that we are facing an affordability crisis. And you've touched in the podcast on several of those issues. And these affordability issues hurt people coming from the periphery in a more substantial way than they do people who are already in the community and who have access to scholarships and there's funds going around. But there's a debate, like, these are new people. Should we really be spending our resources, our hard-earned community resources, in people who are this new? That is where we are today, I think, globally. I think in the United States, particularly, once you bring this parallel to light, that, this is not different to the conversation that we're having in the country about legal or illegal immigration, I think people mellow out and they become a little bit more understanding of the plight of the convert. But in Latin America, Europe, Israel, the trauma of October 7th has really created this sense of retreat, of everyone hates us, nobody loves me, I guess I'll go eat worms kind of mentality.
Good reference there. Sad reference, but
yes.
I'm really grateful to you bringing up that parallel. I both because of you specifically, as we reflect on the impact you've had on us as co-hosts and on our organization, and because of others in our network, including, I'll shout out Esther Hugenholtz. And I bring her up specifically because she is both an immigrant in the classic sense. She was born in the Netherlands and came to the U.S., and you were born in Colombia and came to the U.S., and she's also a convert, a Jew by choice. And I really have grown a lot through conversations with the two of you and with others who have simultaneously both of those lenses, because my sense has been that the parallels you're drawing are really important. My sense is that, like, people who are progressive politically and whose approach to immigration generally is to not accept the nativism that is running so wild in our country, they should understand that that has implications for how they would approach sort of quote unquote immigrants. It's not identical, but like there are a lot of overlaps between those who are outsiders to Judaism and make their way in when we look at people who are outside of citizenship of a country and make their way in. It's strange to me that a lot of people whose politics make them predisposed to support immigration, to talk about the positives of why communities grow stronger through immigration and why it's immoral and unconscionable to treat such people as terribly as our society does and to subject them to suspicion and skepticism and all the things. I think a lot of those people then look at conversion and they actually adopt a very antithetical posture to their politics. And so I really believe we need to talk about those parallels more. But you're the person to best do that and not me. I'm neither an immigrant nor a Jew by choice, a convert. And so I'm wondering if you can get us a little bit more into the weeds there. I mean, we've talked about this with you in the past. Your return visit to our podcast has the phrase blood quanta in the title. And there are ways in which we actually start to need to talk about eugenics and like some really things we don't want to name as Jews about how we ascribe Jewishness and Judaism even to genealogy, and that resembles some pretty dangerous ideas in the world. But can you take us a little more into how we might learn through the overlaps between conversations about immigration and conversations about conversion?
One of the reasons Esther and I, and we were good friends, that we ended up here in the United States is that we were both having experienced, myself, the Latin American reality, and her, the European reality, and then both exposed to what happens in Israel. And we chose to make our Jewish life and our Jewish impact here is because I'm still very, very convinced that despite everything that is going on in the country, the democratic bona fides of the American Jewish community, in the sense of understanding that everybody has a chance, that everyone can contribute, that diversity makes us stronger, a pluribus unum, all of that good stuff is still central to our communities. If anywhere in the world is going to lead into how to create perfectly authentic Jewish communities that are open to the stranger and that are not defined by blood quanta, but by commitment to a set of rules, right? That was the beauty of the American experience as we spoke about it 10 years ago, 12 years ago. I think I remember when I was becoming naturalized, there was this quote on the walls of like the immigration facility saying, a non-Italian will never be able to become Italian, a non-Chinese person. Like there's so much baggage of culture, language, and in some cases, genealogy, right? Lineage but in America, everyone can become American. Why? Because becoming American is you declare your allegiance to a set of rules, the Constitution, and to a community. I'm here to do good by you. I'm here to be a good neighbor. I'm here to strengthen us together. And that was like the collective view of America. And that is definitely the image that we want the Jewish community to emulate. A community where we're here guided by, like Rabbi Soloveitchik said, a covenant of destiny and not a covenant of blood. We're here in a covenant of destiny. We're going to the same place. We're following the same rules. We have the same narrative, even though we might come from different places. And we're here to provide for each other. America is still the place where this template seems less odd. But in the last 10 years, and certainly what's happening today, there's cracks in this ideology. People who had power feel that if we get people who are different, people who are coming from different places, their power, their access is going to be diminished. What we have to say, like what I have been screaming from the rooftops, and Esther and other agents, is like Torah is not like a pie. It's not a limited resource, right? Like, oh, there's more people coming to eat my pie. No, the more people there are, the Jewish community then becomes richer in manpower and in resources and cultural potential. It's not a limited thing that they're coming to take our stuff. They're coming to take off over our communities. I think we have to struggle against this breaking down of America's democratic identity, but also how it's affecting the Jewish community. And Lex, I've seen it, people who are extremely liberal in the immigration debate, but once it comes to their shul, their synagogue, their community, well, I feel awkward if there's people speaking Spanish at my synagogue. If we're not serving gefilte fish, but like gastronomical.
I would love it if we were not serving gefilte fish, just personally. What you're talking about, Juan, it really raises for me, I mean, I've been thinking about this throughout the time that you've been talking, is this like fundamental question that we've talked about on Judaism Unbound a number of times, which is in the deepest way, what is Judaism? Like, what is it really? Some of the way that we can get to discussing a question like that is through metaphors. And there's a certain metaphor about Judaism that, has been imposed on us by anti-Semites, by non-Jews, but also that I think a lot of Jews hold in a certain way, which is like Judaism is like a race. You can't really become that, right? That's a minority position. There's, nobody can really deny that there is conversion, but even I think for people who accept that, there are some converts, they're like, but that's the exception that proves the rule. We can bring in a few people, but really what Judaism is, it's something that you're born into. And then there's maybe like a more expansive definition that's something more like a family, where it's a lot of that. It's mostly people that are born in it, but of course we all get married. And so you can have some new people join the family. That doesn't always go as well as it might, but it's an understanding that a family is not a completely closed structure. And then there's, I think, what we naively used to think that America was, which was something like a little bit more than a family, right? Like it's an idea, a set of ideas. There's lots of immigration. Immigrants can come. That's the story of America. But Of course, it's also a nation state, and it has to have some degree of control of immigration. Otherwise, we're going to be flooded. So it's a more expansive, but it's still a kind of a closed down metaphor. And I'm just thinking about, like, is there a different metaphor that we could use to talk about the Judaism that we aspire towards? And I don't know that I have it. I'm wondering if you have a better one. I was just like racking my brains. I was thinking, like, if you think about people who say, I'm a musician. Nobody says, well, you can't be a musician if you weren't born a musician, right? And nobody says, oh, you can't be a musician unless you partnered up with another musician who was born into it or anything like that. It's like we understand that a musician is somebody who loves music and for whom music is powerful and they want to create music for other people. And I'm just sort of wondering whether there's some conception of Judaism that's more like that if we could better articulate, perhaps it could have some persuasive power. What do you think?
So in academic speak, I would go back to Rabbi Mordechai Kaplan's definition. Judaism is a civilization. I would say it's a global civilization. And for the age of the internet, I would almost, what would you call a joint interest group across the web, right? It's not a trend, but it's like book talk. Like my daughters really like romantasy novels, and they do create a community, and there's people that create content, and there's people who follow, and they have shorthand languages, and within these communities, they end up meeting in real life, they end up falling in love. I think that is a more helpful way of seeing it. However, I'll bring two current examples to see what we're up against. Like that is, I think, the image I would want. We want to be a civilization anywhere across the world can be hooking up to our values. Judaism is not only a personal way of relating to the divinity and to each other and to text and to community, but also it's this sense of kinship with people who follow the same ideas. The counterexamples, a couple of weeks ago, there was a big brouhaha in Argentina because the chief Sephardic rabbi of Argentina presented a letter in which he said they are upholding the ban on conversions. This is a ban that is over 100 years old, in which the Sephardic rabbi of Argentina said that they were not going to accept any conversions performed locally. If you wanted to convert in Argentina, you had to go to Israel. Back then, it was mandatory Palestine. And they said, we are still committed to these standards, and that is the way we're going to preserve. And then he opened his mouth and he said, the purity of our lineage, kind of saying the quiet part out loud. There is a core idea, and the farther right you go, it tends to be stronger, and certainly it's stronger in Israel. This is also a community of lineage, in Yiddish, yichus, right? And if you don't have yichus, if you don't have lineage, it's going to be extremely difficult for you to join this community, to have a position of power, to have a position of influence, right? If you don't have the proper lineage, if you're Sephardic, if you grew up non-religious, you're going to belong to the periphery of the community. And this is a community for which lineage is still very important. For us, that word is toxic. This rabbi got incredible amount of criticism from the community in Argentina, the non-Orthodox rabbis, but there is this notion of they are telegraphing the importance of lineage. And you said it, Dan, it's something that non-Jews certainly believe, but also even Jews who are not that religious, who do not grow up with these ideas, they might have absorbed this. The second example, which is coming from the liberal world, I was approached by a program in the United States to give them my expertise in the Latino Jewish community, and they were planning to partner with this genetics testing company. And for people who got back Jewish results, right, like, you're 2% Ashkenazi, they were going to offer a class in Judaism. I was very shocked. It's like I said, like, what do you think this is going to do? Are these people, because they have 1 or 2% or 3% or 20% of Jewish genetics, is that going to make them more interested? Well, maybe from a marketing perspective, right now people are looking for their identity, but this is not a great way of marketing Judaism because it's still falling into the pitfall that only someone that happens to have a certain heritage, a certain lineage, is going to be interested. Like, why? This is when I used to speak in New York when I was a rabbinical student at JTS. There was always this usually older gentleman, but why would these people want to be Jewish? This notion of Judaism is such a heavy burden, this great onus, that unless you are genetically predisposed to it, you wouldn't want it. That is definitely not what I have experienced. Right? We are a very attractive, extremely complex civilization that people are gravitating towards because they're dissatisfied with their current civilization. So all the way in ultra-Orthodoxy, we have this very robust and very, even if it's unspoken, notion of legacy, of yichus. But all the way in the, let's say, in the left-hand spectrum of the Jewish people, we still have this notion of genealogy as something that is going to bring people to Judaism, make them interested in Judaism, or make them better Jews.
Yeah. I have a swirl of thoughts. I'm really grateful to you for saying some of this really directly. First, the burden thing. Oh, it's so hard to be Jewish. Okay, sure. We have trauma, we have oppression, we have all that history. And I don't think the people saying that are consciously being manipulative. I do think there's a level that it's a tactic. That saying, oh, we don't want a bunch of new Jews because it's hard to be Jewish. That is a nicer thing to say. That is a less explicitly blood-related thing to say than we actually like that Jews descend from other Jews. Like, I think it's kind of a workaround for certain people who, it's actually, you don't really want to be of us. It's so hard. Again, that's not false, but I think it's telling how frequently that gets spoken by people. And then if you ask those people things they love about Judaism, I do think they have things to say. I don't think they actually spend their life like, oh, this is primarily the worst. Maybe some of them do, but like that's not my experience of most of these people. It feels we should think about why that is such a commonly spoken thing and why some folks in the process of conversion have as like a required part of the process that you like make folks aware of how hard it is to be Jewish and etc. Okay, maybe there's value to that. Maybe we're achieving something else by channeling an argument against a bunch of people converting when we might want to say some of the crappier ones. Like for me, you mentioned that on the far right of the religious spectrum, there's this orientation towards lineage and genealogy. I agree with you very much. I think it operates really strongly on the secular, if we were to draw a map of this, that sensation of genealogy, of Judaism being something you are born into and not really about shared destiny, shared rules, it's really strong on the far right of the spectrum. It's also strong on the most secular end of the spectrum. You were hinting at this. I think for people who don't connect to Judaism through its rules, through its holiday structures, through its calendar, it is comforting to feel like, well, I'm Jewish no matter what because I was born into it. I think this is most noticeable when you hear people talk about certain famous folks who are Jewish, and the way they're Jewish is that they converted. Like, it's amazing to me that, I mean, I'm not here to say we should be proud that Ivanka Trump is Jewish, but every time Ivanka Trump is talked about as Jewish that I hear, basically, she's talked about as she converted to Judaism. It's never just Ivanka Trump is Jewish. And Marilyn Monroe, we could go farther back in history. It's very rare that you hear somebody say Marilyn Monroe was Jewish. They say Marilyn Monroe converted to Judaism. And I think there is an implied asterisk operating that, again, people don't want to say it explicitly, but those folks on the secular side, they kind of want you to hold an asterisk for the people who weren't hashtag born this way, in a darker sense of born this way than Lady Gaga. It feels important for us to name that shadow side, and for those of us who were born into it to say it, because I hope that those of us whose Jewishness is not questioned as much, who can point to lineage as, look, that sort of makes us part of the club, spend some time thinking about why we feel in our language and otherwise that we have to talk about folks who converted as folks who converted as opposed to they're Jewish. Or Dan's example, they're a musician. I actually really like that. I guess my question, I don't need us to turn optimistic. I get that part of the takeaway from this conversation is that you were optimistic many years ago and you hold less now. I am curious, as somebody who experiences the gifts of converts in our space, we have so many folks who are any number of places on their journey into Judaism. We have people who are not yet Jewish and start sort of thinking about whether they might convert. We have folks who have finished conversion processes and are Jewish, all disproportionately part of Judaism Unbound spaces, disproportionately part of many other digital spaces. And I guess I'd love to open up to you on that front, since part of our initial conversation was about the digital world. What has evolved? What hasn't on the front of Jews by choice, converts, being part of Jewish learning spaces, Jewish holiday marking, Shabbat, etc., in the digital world?
I think one of the things that has changed is I am on the older end of this wave, but if you go at least to liberal seminaries, there is a disproportionate amount of converts entering the rabbinate. And this is what I call the silent revolution. It happened sometime between the ordination of women and the ordination of LGBTQ plus students. There was this massive influx of converts into the rabbinate, many of them extremely comfortable with sharing their stories, some of them less, but having those voices of, here is how I am Jewish without having a Jewish grandfather. Here is how I give meaning to all of these holidays, to Kaddish, when I'm saying Kaddish for a non-Jewish parent. All of these things are newish experiences. I'm pretty sure in the 40s and the 50s it happened, but it was so peripheral that it was not in the spotlight. But now there are so many voices that are teaching Torah from a place of coming from without, that it makes it easier, right? It's people who are aware that, oh, these are the melodies that we all grew up with. Like, no, I didn't grow up with those melodies. And therefore, I can create a Judaism that is really starting from zero, right? Judaism for dummies, Judaism for beginners. If you look a lot of these books, they have assumptions. And I think what we have created with so many converts joining the rabbinate, joining education, the cantorate, positions of influence, is to articulate what does a Judaism that really starts in, not in zero, but in negative spaces, right? I was really Catholic, and how I got from really Catholic to an observant Jew. Not like, oh, I was a secular Jew and I was starting from zero. No, this is starting in negative spaces. If you compare, there's not that many voices in Israel or in the Orthodox world of converts. One of the reasons I think, and I've seen it with some of my convert friends that have tried to go into the Orthodox rabbinate, none of them are leading synagogues. I know several convert rabbis who are the leaders of synagogues, who are teaching in seminaries, who are, through their own merit, given positions of power and authority. I still see in the Orthodox world a severe discrimination. These folks might get to teach in a community day school, but maybe not Talmud, right? So I think the revolution is currently contained within the liberal spectrum, because only in liberal spectrums do converts have positions of authority. There are some visible converts in the Orthodox world, but there's some level of tokenizing. They get to speak of, I'm a convert and I am now so happy to be living a Torah lifestyle, but I am going to be, in gaming terms, I'm an NPC.
Which, for people not familiar, I think it's a really apt comparison. It's a non-player character. It's it's like the scenery, but it's a player that's in the background of the game,
in a video
but
game,
who doesn't actually have agency to make any choices in the story.
Right.
Yeah. Wow, a lot of good pop culture references today. The reality of my thinking is that I would put an asterisk next to people who were born Jewish. To me, somebody who is born Jewish has done nothing to indicate whether or not they actually want to be Jewish or care about it or that it's anything in their lives, whereas somebody who converted is actively saying, like, I want this. I obviously don't really want to put an asterisk next to people that were born Jewish, but if I had to put an asterisk next to somebody, I would put it next to the people who were born Jewish. And I want to bring into, at this point in the conversation, like Daniel Hartman's characterization of Genesis Jews versus Exodus Jews. To me, that's a really helpful, even though, of course, it's not pure like any analogy, but the idea that in Genesis is the story of a family. And essentially, Genesis Jews are those who believe that Judaism is fundamentally a lineage, or something that you're born into. And then there's Exodus, is the story of essentially a people that accepted a set of ideas or a set of a civilization, let's say, and that Exodus Jews are those who choose that, whether they were born into a family that had already been part of that or not.
It's also a book of art, by the way. We don't know. He doesn't talk about that. But like the second half of the book is all about pretty art, building the tabernacle. And I think Exodus Jews being understood as that is good too.
Yeah, well, I think I've said like one of my favorite stories from the Talmud is the potential convert who hears about the clothes that the high priest gets to wear, and that's why he wants to convert. Right. And Hillel says, "Yeah, that's okay, convert." And then study.
You want the bling bling.
Yeah. So I think that this idea of the Exodus Jews, right, or Judaism as defined by Exodus Jews is worth considering. And it's also so interesting because I think that a lot of times when people think of Exodus Jews, in their minds, when I would describe something like this, they would say, well, of course, the Orthodox are Exodus Jews because, they're committed to all these rules and regulations. And so isn't that, of course, that they've accepted the rules, the stuff. And you'd think so, but it actually, in the stories that you're sharing, there's such a strong Genesis element within the Orthodox world for the most part that it's just kind of fascinating to reflect upon. I'm curious, though, if you ever think about a kind of alternative history future novel, right? The one that we have in Jewish spaces is Herzl's Altneuland, which I'm not talking about Zionism, but the idea that Herzl sort of imagined this future state and wrote a novel describing it. And there's a lot of power, I think, in being able to describe that vision of the future. A lot of times I talk about the story of the scouts or the spies that were sent into the promised land. And one of the problems is that when they go and scout out the land, they don't really bring back a compelling vision of what that future could be like in this land. They only bring back the concerns about all the obstacles that are in the way. Let's imagine the story that they would have told about how this could be, and not the utopian story that is just completely divorced from reality, but the story of a real version of Judaism that we could imagine that would be different from our version, but it actually could happen if only people wanted it to, if only people tried. And I'm curious if you have a story that you think about when you envision that possible future, whether it's the version you want to talk about, the pre-October 7th version that you would have said if we'd had this conversation a couple of years ago, or the post-October 7th vision that takes into account, what we've experienced since then.
So I think the current system provides us great metaphors. And what I tell people is we are in trouble. We used to say, 15 million, 16 million Jews. That sounded 40 years ago, that sounded impressive. How many Swifties are there in the world? Right? And now that we have a shared platform for tracking interests, 15 million is nothing compared to the amount of Swifties we have in the United States.
Mm-hmm. Just for the benefit of my dad, I'll explain that Swifties are people who follow the pop singer Taylor Swift.
Who like and listen to the music of Taylor Swift with some regularity.
And have built a culture, like it's also kind of, it starts to become religious when you look at the rituals associated with it, the communities built around it. I think it's a great.
So yes, if we were for a second to imagine that there were as many Jews in America as there are Swifties, how would that change everything? we were 50 millions, how would that change? I'm sure that as a Jew in Oklahoma, I wouldn't have this much trouble getting my holidays recognized for my kids. And if there is something that touches me particularly, that affects me, right? Like we have seen that the fans of sports teams, of popular music figures have political power. Now, some people will say, well, you're comparing Judaism, which is an all life encompassing choice, to what music do I like? But for us being the people of the book, there's great skepticism on the learnability of Judaism, whether Judaism is something that you can learn. The day October 7th happened, it was Shmini Atzeret. And here in Oklahoma, we have a very robust conversion program. The people who had finished the conversion were no less sad and no less shaken than, right, like the people who are not yet converted. Why? Because it affects them, right? Like once they've decided that Judaism is what they like and that Jews are their community, whether they're in or not, whether they've gotten like I'm an official Swiftie certificate and I've done the special dance, I already have these emotional connections, and everything else I can learn from books and podcasts and classes. Judaism is, yes, complex, but it's nothing like it can be learned. The Rambam, who comes and says, I'm going to write a book, the Mishnah Torah, and he says it explicitly, like if you have a Bible and my book, you're fine, you're good. We can teach Judaism, and once you are learning Judaism, you're going to get all of the other experiences that some Jews think, oh, this is just for me. You're going to get the anti-Semitism. You're going to get the trauma. That is going to happen. That happens to converts and non-converts alike. So I'm a great advocate for the teachability of Judaism. I think we are primed for a renewal of the Chavurah movement. When I started my work, my communities in Latin America were dreaming, oh yeah, we need a building and we need like all the amenities so we can become a real community. And I said, you're a Chavurah. Imagine yourself as a democratic, non-hierarchical group of Jews who are looking to create joint experience. That's it. Don't try to imitate the other established synagogues who have 100 years of inherited wealth and social capital to have these beautiful sanctuaries. If you measure yourself against that rubric, you're always going to feel like a failure. Always in the periphery, you have, like, we can learn this from the periphery. When gay Jews were not allowed in the synagogue, or were not allowed to give expression to their Judaism, what did they do? They created their own communities. And they were tiny in the beginning, and then they grew. So this is something that we can learn, and I think that is the way of the future for many of these communities.
Yeah. I think you're opening up a core question that Dan hinted at the beginning, but this is a moment to ask, what is Judaism? The spoiler, like, we don't think there is a Judaism that you can point at and say, this is Judaism across history. I think that's actually what's operating when people are so afraid of conversion, because what's the danger? What's the problem? What's the thing that they're nervous about? They're nervous that the Judaism they're familiar with will be replaced. And yes, I'm using the word replaced because I know that the people in Charlottesville talked about Jews will not replace us. Like fears about immigration, fears about new folks coming into our group, whether that group is a nation state or a religious group or ethno-religious group, however we want to think about Judaism. The fears are of replacement. The fears are of, there is something that is Judaism that I know, that is recognizable to me, that is familiar, that provides comfort. And if there's new people that come in, they have a strong chance of shifting what that Judaism is to be something that is less familiar, provides less comfort, because it is less legible to me and maybe more legible to them and their sensibilities and their ways of being in the world. Judaism does change when new people become Jewish. And I think one of the massive mistakes that advocates of conversion, advocates of inclusion-minded thinking, I think a big mistake they've made is sort of going forward with, yeah, these people can bring increased energy and power to what we already know and love. They can be attendees of the Torah study. Lots of converts are even more enthusiastic about the stuff that Jews who are born into. Like they're excited about that, and they can strengthen the numbers in our pews. They can strengthen the number at our Torah studies.
We can sell more gefilte fish.
Right, exactly. Like more consumers of gefilte fish. When the obvious answer is some of the people aren't going to want gefilte fish and they're going to make something else. Do I think there's a community on the gefilte fish front that is like really deeply committed to specifically having gefilte fish? Funny enough, I actually think there is. I actually think that when you talk about gefilte fish, like I think there's some of our listeners right now who are actually annoyed at us because we're assuming that gefilte fish isn't very good. And they are part of conversations about like gefilte fish is actually good, and the idea that it's bad is sort of internalized oppression, and the idea that our foods are somehow not delicious. Like, okay, there's dynamics there. I'm not going to deny that, but also like it's okay.
I don't eat any fish, by the way.
Yeah, there you go. Dan doesn't eat fish. I do, and I like gefilte fish less than other fish. I'm an Ashkenazi Jew whose family has gefilte fish at gatherings, and when it's there, there's like whatever sort of, oh yeah, it's familiar, it's comfortable, it codes that this is a Jewish holiday. I'm familiar with the Debbie Friedman song, I Am a Latko, where literally she has a line that gefilte fish is supposed to be at every holiday. Super Ashkenormative. Gefilte fish is not for all holidays, and if we welcome more new Jews, it will be less present, and it's not just about the gefilte fish. We should stop saying, oh, people who convert to Judaism, they can be new soldiers in the existing battles that Judaism is fighting. They can do all the things we've been doing and just bring sort of their bodies to that. No, they're going to change things. And the question I want to ask is, how do we make that not bad, but the whole excitement? The second we say, you know what, Judaism is not about what is familiar, about what's comfortable. Judaism should charge us to be who we want to be in the world. Judaism should be enlivened and meeting various moments, which requires change. It requires new kinds of thinking. It requires people who are seeing it from the vantage point of beginner's mind. Converts must be there to make this work. And if we ever have a moment where we're not having those people, that's when we have to be concerned, because then Judaism will start to be familiar and comfortable and recognizable and legible. And that's bad, actually. Like, that's not what we want, because our history is one where Judaism is constantly ebbing and flowing. Like, I could keep on going, but at the end of the day, I think we have to name that, like, there is a replacement. Like, there are things about Judaism that are the way they are right now. And if more new kinds of thinking come, which, by the way, those can come from converts, but also from Jews by birth, who just the world changes and how we relate to our tradition changes. Like, I guess I'm wondering, to what degree is this really about convincing people that Judaism is not about preservation, it's not about conservation, it's not about continuity, continuing what has been done. The whole point is change, and so that means we're not going to say converts, oh yeah, they're welcome to come aboard our existing projects, but rather, hey, come on in, and we actually need you to bring Davka, specifically what is not already of our mindset, of our spaces.
I think an important dichotomy that I, when I try to persuade communities to be more open, is what is core and what is aesthetics. 90% of the time, when communities are arguing about something, it's usually about aesthetics. How do things look? The good thing about aesthetics is that you can poke around and show that aesthetics change, right? Most synagogues in North America have pictures of the presidents, right, on their wall, or like the graduating class of the Hebrew school. Just take people there and said, like, look how silly people's hair was in the 60s. I'm a conservative rabbi, and the motto of the movement for the longest time was tradition and change. Change should not be surprising. We've been given a historical perspective, mostly through movies, right? You have An American Tale, so we were immigrants in the Lower East Side, but like that shows change. There are no cats in America, and the streets are paved with cheese. The Judaism of Fievel is not a Judaism. And that's just 2-3 generations, like proving the inevitability of change is like, it's almost obvious. Like, we are not a community that is trying to preserve. And so, like, we do not, Chadash Asur Min Torah. That was the Chazon Ish, the great ultra-Orthodox leader in Israel, had this thing. Everything new is forbidden from the Torah. Chadash Asur Min Torah. We are not that community. That community is going to have a problem with change, although we know right? I lived in Israel 20 years ago. The ultra-Orthodox community today is not the same community as it was 20 years ago. In dress, in values, in politics, what we do have to preserve is our core. What is the core? Is it the Torah? Is it the 613 commandments? We can have a debate about what is core. The important detail to keep in mind is the people that are coming to us, they're not coming because of our aesthetics. By the way, I do like gefilte fish. I don't like jarred gefilte fish. I make my own, but they're not coming because of our aesthetics.
We'll show note the beautiful film about different generations of women and how they make gefilte fish differently. There's lots of Torah in gefilte fish everywhere. Don't give us your angry emails about how we hate gefilte fish.
People are coming because of the core. I see it right now. Conversion to Judaism is up in America since October 7th. I can tell you who is converting by us in Oklahoma City. It's mostly young Gen Z, young millennials, most of them who grew up in evangelical churches, but because they're queer, or they're queer friendly, or they're queer adjacent, they don't find themselves in that community.
And this is a national trend. It's not just Oklahoma City. This is for sure documented all around the country.
Yes. And what they say is, what I like about Jews, what I like about Judaism is dialogue, that we can debate, that we have this book, and that there can be disagreement, that the Jewish community, because it has been peripheral, and it still is, in many places of the country, we are still unwelcome in many spaces. It can be a place where the unwelcome feel welcome. That is, and I think those are pretty core values of our community and of our narrative, right? That we don't say we are descendants from the gods. We're descended from slaves. That's part of our narrative. We are not a genealogy of the blessed. We are a genealogy of the downtrodden. And that is something that I don't think it's going to change. We're not going to get rid of that narrative. We're going to get rid of the aesthetics. The aesthetics are going to change. How Jews look, what Jews eat, that has changed, and we can prove it. But the core values keep going, and it's the core values that are bringing people in. I think in most cases, I think some people they fall in love with Jewish aesthetics, and then they're going to be really upset in 20 years when Jewish aesthetics change, and then they complain, when I joined the synagogue, things used to be different.
Thank you so much, Juan Mejia, for joining us. This has been another fantastic conversation.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. And in 10 years, we can talk about if these prophecies were happy prophecies or unhappy prophecies. But may we still be both alive, all of us alive and well in 10 years. Many happy anniversaries to the podcast and to the wonderful work you do.
Amen. Thank you so much, Juan Mejia. Thanks to all of you out there for listening. We hope you've enjoyed this conversation. As we close things out, a couple reminders. First, Judaism Inbound. It's a very relevant topic for this conversation. This is our Intro to Judaism course. If you are looking to convert to Judaism, or even if you're not and you're just looking for an Intro to Judaism course, whether that's because you're already Jewish and want a refresher, or you're not Jewish and you just want to learn, all of those categories of human beings are welcome to take Judaism Inbound. Registration is now up at judaismunbound.com/classes. We also have other amazing course options that are coming up. Financial aid is available for all of these opportunities. Again, just head to judaismunbound.com/classes to learn more. And you can get the financial aid link by clicking any of the individual classes and scrolling down to the area where you'll see it hyperlinked. So that's one note. Another is that Shabbat Unbound, our monthly gathering that collectively over the course of 12 months constitutes a year-long Shabbat service, will be convening this coming Friday the 13th. I know, it's a little bit scary, but Friday the 13th of February, we'll have Shabbat Unbound, and the next one in March is also a Friday the 13th. You rarely get two in a row. Very exciting times. You can register for Shabbat Unbound by heading to judaismunbound.com/Shabbat. We will now close having made those Judaism Unboundments, and we will do so by encouraging you to be in touch with us, as we always do. You can send us emails at dan@judaismunbound.com or lex@judaismunbound.com. You can be in touch via Facebook or Instagram by heading to our handles. Both of those are at Judaism Unbound. You can always go to our website, JudaismUnbound.com, to check out show notes for this episode and all sorts of other juicy goodies. And we are always deeply appreciative when you support us with a financial donation, which you can do on either a monthly recurring basis or via a one-time gift at JudaismUnbound.com/donate. So thank you so much for listening. And with that, this has been Judaism Unbound.